Well, thanks so much for being with us today. We are 101, so I am going to get started. My name is Kiana Simmons, and I am a project officer with the capacity development team at the Green Municipal Fund. So thanks for joining us for this workshop. We've developed this program in partnership with CAP, who will be leading today's session. But I'm here as technical support. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send me a message in the chat, and I'll see if I can help you. Just a few items to note before CAP launches the session. We do have simultaneous interpretation available for participants today. So if you would like to participate in English, you can be sure to click the little globe icon and select the English channel, or you can click the globe icon and select the French channel. Donc aujourd'hui, nos panélistes vont parler en anglais. Mais si vous souhaitez écouter en
Our
français,
panelists will
sur le
speak in
bouton
English, but if you want to
d'interprétation
listen in French,
en
please
bas
click on the interpretation
sur
button
la
at the
globe.
bottom of the screen on the globe.
And today's workshop will be facilitated by CAP. As I mentioned, they have taken the questions that you submitted through the question and answer, through the registration page. And they've compiled those into sort of the most common questions, but if you have other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I would also encourage you to share resources. If something is asked that is relevant and you have something to share, please feel free to copy and paste links or ask questions to other members of the meeting. Before I pass it to today's host, I would like to first start off by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you today from lands that have been inhabited by Indigenous peoples for thousands of years. We would like to recognize the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people as the traditional custodians of the land upon which FCM's offices are located, as well as where I'm currently located in my home office here in Ottawa. We deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place, and we also recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and all First Nations people in shaping and strengthening this community in particularly. So without further ado, I am going to pass it to Cap to introduce our presenters.
Thank you, Kiana. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Daisy from Clean Air Partnership, and with me also is Devanchi from Clean Air Partnership. Clean Air Partnership is a registered charity that works to transform cities into more sustainable, resilient, and vibrant communities where resources are used efficiently, the air is clean to breathe, and greenhouse gas emissions are minimized. We are very glad to be here, joined by our guest speakers. Jessica Ruddle joined us today as the Manager of Fleet Services for the City of Mississauga, excuse me. Before joining the City of Mississauga, Jessica accumulated almost 20 years of municipal service with the City of Burlington, the Town of Pelham, and the City of Niagara Falls. Her portfolio includes full lifecycle management activities for the city's corporate fleet, including corporate maintenance and decommissioning of vehicles and equipment for more than 1,600 assets. Thank you, Jessica, for being with us. Noami DeVeest is the Advisor Programs Outreach Green Municipal Fund, a 1.6 billion program which supports municipalities and their partners in the implementation of innovative sustainable development initiatives. She works directly with applicants to strengthen the technical viability of their projects, proposals, and provides guidance to project reporting and finances. Thank you, Naomi, for being with us. And with this, we are going to hear now Jessica. I will invite you to share your screen. We will have a 10-minute presentation followed by Naomi's presentation, and then we are going on in a breakout rooms.
Great, thanks, Debbie. I appreciate the intro. Hopefully everyone can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So as mentioned, my name is Jessica Ruddle. I'm the Manager of Fleet Services for the City of Mississauga. It's a pleasure to be here today with all of you, so thanks for having me. So today I'll talk to you a bit about, we're going to go through some municipal policies that can strengthen the advancement of fleet electrification. We'll talk a bit about charging infrastructure, greening the practice and fleet, because as we all know, policy and practice can be two different things. And lastly, I'll talk about some quick recommendations. So municipal fleet policies. I started with the climate emergency declaration because almost everyone has one, and I hope your municipality has one already. So 649 municipalities in Canada have declared a climate emergency, but what does it mean and how are you using it to advance your fleet electrification efforts? I suggest that you leverage the declaration to ensure you are enhancing your capital funding request for fleet replacements and also for your infrastructure requirements. Ideally, climate emergency declarations come with dedicated funding, but if not, many finance departments are including an environmental levy to ensure that green initiatives can be funded. We know and we realize that going green will cost some more money upfront and your acquisition costs, but we also acknowledge that your total cost of ownership, including your operating costs, should decrease. So I suggest that you consider and work your total cost of ownership model for each asset category that you want to convert to a green option. We know that operating costs are reduced for maintenance, parts, and labor, and fuel as well. Often what can be helpful in telling the story is that identifying the net capital impact of greening the fleet. So if you needed, say, $40,000 for an ICE vehicle, your net impact, say you need $50,000, that $10,000 gap is what you want to highlight as being an important piece that your councils need to budget for to support this emergency declaration. Another important policy, so many of you have these as well, so your green vehicle and equipment policy. So what those policies generally state is that if there is a low or a no emission option that exists on the market, the municipality must buy that option. And we know in fleet that can be, it's simple in policy and in principle, but there's a lot more to it to make that assessment and ensure that it can work for the operation. So to ensure that it works for the operation, you need to be reviewing the vehicle usage. So whether that's weekly, monthly, or annually, to ensure that your duty cycle behavior aligns with a green option. So do you have enough downtime per day with that vehicle to charge it and make sure that it has sufficient charging for the following day? Reviewing the start and end location for each vehicle. Is there a charger already that they can access? Is there, a regular standard outlet that they can plug into? And do you have enough downtime to charge it? As well, what I would suggest is that you consider aligning with divisions to start out with that their mandate aligns with your goals. So something that I had done in my previous work experience was our forestry team. They obviously have a huge environmental lens on the work that they do, and they were a natural group to start our green fleet transition with. Lastly, if you have a group internally that says, no, we absolutely won't go green with our vehicles, we know this happens from time to time, make sure you have an escalation process within the organization that you are not making that decision. So it's going to go up to somebody higher than somebody managing the fleet to say that they are allowed to not go green if you have this policy. Next, a vehicle replacement funding policy. These types of policies generally ensure that you have a reserve fund for your fleet replacement. It ensures that your fleet isn't growing exponentially. So one of the big things, it's not only greening the fleet that you have already, but we also want to reduce our overall fleet size whenever possible. So when you have a replacement funding policy, it ensures that the replacement funds that you get when it's time to replace that they are compounded annually. So you have enough money, because that vehicle that cost $20,000 5 years ago, we're now seeing it's $40,000 or $50,000. So there has to be that compound financing built in. As well, it ensures that net new additions to your fleet require business cases and budget submissions. So those should all be attached to service level changes. And again, it ensures that your fleet is not growing in size unnecessarily. And lastly, something that many of us have as well, asset management plans. These are really important to ensure, again, that you're considering the whole life perspective funds required for the vehicle, that total cost of ownership, instead of just the upfront costs. As we know, in Ontario, at least in 2025, fleet will be required by Ontario Regulation 58817 to be included, but many municipalities are even ahead of that today, including fleet in their asset management plans. It obviously provides overall fleet condition metrics. So again, this will show the condition of your fleet today, and that you're not gradually, the fleet's not in worse condition, and that your fleet's not, again, your fleet's not growing unnecessarily. Okay, so quickly on charging infrastructure, these are some, again, I only have 10 minutes, so I'm going to go as quick as I can. But for charging infrastructure, you want to ensure that there's a lead assigned corporately. I think this is something that many municipalities struggle with. And that's to ensure that planning and funding requests are put in for priority sites. So if you have a dedicated fund for charging infrastructure, that's great. But whoever's leading that, and usually it could be your facilities teams, that they are working with you in fleet to make sure that you are placing that charging infrastructure where you need to have it. And you're doing the planning and the evaluation of the capacity of the building and the capacity of the grid ahead of time before you're buying that vehicle. These folks, they will lead the installation of the infrastructure, and they will lead and support the maintenance of the charging infrastructure. So again, I don't generally, fleet groups may not have this expertise, but your facilities folks might. So greening the fleet in practice. You want to provide data to your user groups. And I always say the more data that you can provide to the user groups, the better. One of those examples I talked about earlier was the usage patterns. So you can get the use patterns from your fuel system. Hopefully your fuel system is integrated with your fleet asset management system. And you get the data on, you know, how many times is the vehicle fueling and how many kilometers is it traveling per week, per month, per year. And when you show that data to the user groups, they can't fight back against the data, right? The data is what it is. And when you look at the vehicle availability and the category and the range that is available, you can match those up and find a good match for people. You want to present the data in a way that is easy to digest for somebody who may not look at data all the time. So whether it's in graphs or different formats, and go through it with them, meet with them and go through it with them. Something else that we like to do is to provide annual low utilization reports. So if there are opportunities to reduce your overall fleet size because a vehicle doesn't travel, in Mississauga, we use 6,000 kilometers. So any vehicle that drives less than 6,000 kilometers, we look for opportunities that we can reduce our fleet. So, and take that vehicle out of the fleet. Sometimes it's possible and sometimes it's not, but those are when you can look for opportunities to create a vehicle pool or car sharing across multiple municipal services, or use seasonal rentals if you notice that the use is just seasonal in nature. Most of us will have telematics system data, and that also provides information on utilization. And then, of course, if you are successful and when you are successful in bringing in green vehicles, just promote them broadly, right? Promote them within the organization, do demos with them, have other user groups try them out. You can pilot them in certain areas, but promote the success and how you've been able to reduce the fuel consumption, and really using that data will help tell your story. So quickly, just a few recommendations from me to think about. So you don't have to green the entire fleet at once. I think sometimes when we think about greening the fleet, we think of, maybe our largest vehicles or the largest emitters. And that would be great if we could start there. But as we know, the technology hasn't come that far yet. So start small, start with one vehicle, start with, just your light duty fleet, or just your zero turn lawn mowers, just your Zambonis or ice resurfacers. Start there and build the momentum from there. And again, make sure that you're demonstrating, doing demos and testing the technology with your end users to gain their buy-in. It's not ideal to have a new electric vehicle just show up and then all of a sudden everybody puts their hands up and says, well, I wasn't involved in ordering that. I would never support that. See if you can work with a local vendor to bring in a vehicle ahead of time so that they can drive it. They can test drive it around the block or around your maintenance yards or wherever it is, so they can have a level of comfort with the vehicle beforehand. And because electric vehicles are being adopted by more people personally as well, it's becoming a lot easier because people have more personal experience with electric vehicles. But again, in the workplace, make sure you're doing those demos and testing. So that's all for me. I'm happy to answer questions later, but over to you guys.
Thanks so much, Jessica, for the short presentation. Actually, very good points you raised. And we are going to continue the discussion in the breakout room after Naomi's presentation. So stay with us. And now I'll invite Naomi to present her presentation. Take it away now. Naomi, maybe you're muted, we don't hear you.
My apologies, everyone. Give me a moment to get set up. Hopefully you can all see my screen. Is it looking good?
Yeah.
Okay, super. Thanks for the confirmation. All right, super. Well, I also really appreciate the invitation to join all of you today. So my name is Naomi and I work as a funding advisor with the Municipal Fund at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. So what I wanted to share with you today is a little bit of detail on the funding programs that we have at GMF that can be used for municipal fleets. We'll start with a little bit of an intro to who we are at GMF. So we are the largest program at FCM. So at FCM, we're a national organization. We have member municipalities in every province and territory. And I think now about 90% of people living in Canada are represented by our municipal members. So the GMF is our biggest and longest running program. It's just about 20 years old now. And over the course of that 20 years, we've funded close to 2,000 projects. And so we work across these 5 sectors that you see on the screen. I'm really going to focus in on transport and then even more so on our options for fleets. But I thought I would share as well a quick overview of our other 4 sectors, just because you never know who's in the room and who that might apply to. So we do also have funding for projects in energy. Right now, that's mostly focused on energy efficient buildings, but that could be municipally owned community buildings or the new build or retrofit. I'd say, in fact, that's our busiest sector. So lots of funding offers available there. We have funding for municipal solid waste management, for water. So that could be stormwater treatment, wastewater treatment, or potable water conservation. And then finally, in land use, we have funding for brownfields right now. So that could either be remediation or redevelopment. So across all 5 of those sectors, and including in transport and fleet management, this is what the funding looks like kind of more concretely. So really our funding offer is designed to support you depending where you might be in your project lifecycle, where you're at. So if you're early on, we have funding for feasibility studies. So that might be looking at assessing different options. So in the case of a fleet, what are the options for your fleet? What's the technical feasibility of multiple options or of a specific option that you're considering. Also, what's it going to cost? Is it financially feasible? All those types of things can be eligible assessments as part of a feasibility study. We've seen many municipalities do these studies in-house, and also many bring on a consultant depending on how technical the project is, what your municipality's capacity is. So both your time as a municipality and the time of a consultant or project partners can be eligible under the study funding. And that study, for that kind of study, we can offer a grant of up to $175,000 or half of project costs. If you're a little bit further along and you're really looking to test a specific approach, we have a grant for pilot projects that can go up to $500,000 for 50 to 80% of project costs. Smaller municipalities, if you're under 20,000 people, we can go up to that 80% portion of the project costs. One thing I'll really emphasize for our specific pilot project funding is that it really has to be a small scale or a temporary test of a project. And we're really looking at something that's maybe a little bit innovative. So if you were to say to us, we're really just interested in buying a number of light duty passenger vehicles, I'd say that unfortunately for now, that's not something that would fit in our pilot offer. It would really need to be testing something. But that might be something that could fit as a capital project, for example. So we do also have a mix of loan and grant for larger projects, which could include the procurement of a large number of EVs. I'll give an example in a moment of what kind of things we might be able to fund as a pilot. This year, for example, we had the City of Vancouver working with us to test an electric fire truck. So that's the kind of thing where maybe there could be some possibility. So I'll dive into our two funding streams for transport projects, but maybe if there's one takeaway message for our funding is that if you are interested, step one is just come talk to us. So I'm available myself, and then I have some really wonderful colleagues who can also work with you, and we can really get into the specifics of your project, what the different funding streams are, and is it something that sounds like a good fit. So if you forget everything I say, just give us a call if you're considering or looking for funding for any of your transport or other projects. So for our transport stream, we have these two categories. And the first is really the one that I'd say is most applicable to municipal fleets. So we can fund, and this again can be studies, pilot projects, or capital projects that look at reducing fossil fuel use in fleet vehicles. It can be municipally owned vehicles, but also vehicles that provide municipal services. So if, for example, you contract your services to like your waste management services to another company, that could be an eligible vehicle as well. So this could be purchasing properly sized fleet options, fleet optimization, alternative fueling infrastructure, or fuel switching. So I thought I'd highlight a few examples. So this one is a feasibility study that we funded a couple of years ago in Ontario, County of Kings. I think they're about 30,000 in population. And really what they did was bring on a consultant to look at what their current vehicles were, what the current fuel consumption was, what opportunities there might be in the future years to replace some of their fleet with either hybrid or electric vehicles, different fuel options. I think they also looked at biodiesel as one option, what it would cost. They did a sector scan of what vehicles were available on the market. And as a result, came out with a plan of how to green their fleet over time. So if you're at that early stage, our feasibility funding can be used either for your staff time or to bring on a consultant to help you kind of assess what are the options for greening your fleet. We get a lot of questions about charging infrastructure, and is that something that we can fund? I'd say that the bad news is we can't fund charging stations installation as a standalone project for most cases. But in our different funding streams, there are some opportunities to look at that as part of a broader project. So if you were replacing a number of vehicles, for example, that might be an eligible cost. I thought I'd highlight this example as well, because it was a neat project that brought together a number of municipalities in BC. It was led by the regional district of Kootenay Boundary. And what they did through our feasibility study stream was to look at a gap in EV charging stations that were available for the community. It's a pretty rural context, pretty broad, and so they looked at what charging stations were available. They looked at profiles of different users to understand their needs, and they also looked at what would be the additional load requirements at specific facilities that the public could use if charging stations were put in place. So that early assessment allowed a bigger network of charging stations to be built by municipalities for community use. So beyond that feasibility study stage, as I said, we can also fund pilot projects. The fire truck example is one that we're working on, but this is also a pilot project model that has been done a few times with GMF funding. There's a few projects like this that we funded in Quebec and one in New Brunswick now. And it's a pilot project that's been led in multiple cases by, again, a cohort of rural municipalities where maybe a transit option isn't really financially feasible. So what they tested was, in this case, they brought together 6 municipalities. Across the 6 municipalities, they bought 10 EVs, put in place 13 charging stations. And those were passenger vehicles that were available for municipal staff to use. But outside of hours, they also made them available to the public through a car sharing platform. So they adapted the vehicles to make them appropriate for car sharing. And then in this case, ran a 2-year pilot to test, how staff use them, how the public use them, and how that car sharing option went. And it's been an approach that's been replicated in a few places, as I said. So that's really a really quick whirlwind tour of our funding that's more focused on fleets. I will share as well our second funding category, maybe a bit less directly tied, but you never know if this could be something that might support your work. So we can also fund projects more broadly that look at commuting options and transport networks. So the types of things that might be included. I know ride sharing is up on the screen here, so that one is kind of can fit in either category depending on the details. But we've also funded things like not so much recreational trails, more active transport trails that are helping commuters, for example, shift to a less fuel-intensive mode of travel. And then to apply for this, we're really looking at projects that can show that they are reducing the number of the cars on the road or reducing vehicle kilometers traveled in a certain region. So that's really a very, very quick tour of our funding, but I thought I'd highlight as well that we do have, beyond funding, some resources that are available to you. So we have a really extensive resource library. These examples I see are focused on buildings, but there's lots of interesting things there in terms of transit, case studies from past projects that have been funded. Events and training like this for sure. But then the one that I would say is kind of my favorite tool is our database of projects that we've funded in the past. So that's on our website, the Green Municipal Fund website. You can filter by province, by sector, so transport projects, for example. And there's really good summaries of some really interesting projects that have been done across the country. And one thing that I'm always happy to do if it's of interest is to try and facilitate an introduction. So if there's a project that you're really interested in, feel free to reach out to me and I can see if I can put you in touch with the people who led that project. Often I find past funding recipients are really, really interested and keen to talk about what they learned and what worked or what didn't. So I'll just leave you with this contact information. There's our general information. Here's my direct contact details. So really happy to speak with you about any projects that you're working on, transport or any of our other 4 sectors. And then lastly, the FCM newsletter there is a really good place to look for new funding. So right now we're in the process of revising our core funding offer. So there will be some new funding opportunities coming out. And then in November, we received a new investment really focused on climate adaptation. So within the next year, there'll be new funding for climate adaptation projects too. So the FCM Connect newsletter is a really good spot to see updates for that. So I'll leave you with that and really happy to answer any questions during the breakout session in a little bit.
Thank you very much, Noemi, for your presentation. Very good examples of how you can use GMF funding. So now we are going to split the session into 2 separate Q&As. Jessica will stay with us in the main room and answer questions on policy. And the session will have a live interpretation. And Noemi will answer a question on funding, and the session will be in the breakout room. Noemi is bilingual and will be answering your question in English and French. So you'll be able to see the breakout room shortly in front. Also, for those of you who ask the questions, we'll address them now in the breakout rooms. I'll just give 1 minute for folks to settle in whatever room they choose. Okay, and folks are still choosing, but I will start because I think we receive a lot of questions and we would like to address them all. Jessica, you're okay to start with?
Sure, yep.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. So I will jump to the first question, which is, what are some main policies for a municipality just starting out its fleet electrification journey to help them get started?
Great. So I think I would suggest that you need to get support and understanding from your local politicians on the fact that greening the fleet is going to cost money. So it's going to cost a bit more money up front than it would if you were buying ICE vehicles. So that green vehicle and equipment policy is pretty important. And again, I like to suggest that when policies like this are approved, that there is an understanding that there is funding that will also need to be approved to support it. So those two things go hand in hand. And once you have a buy-in from the local politicians that you should be reducing the emissions, whether it's electric or else, whatever else, I think you're well on your way. So that for me would be the most important one. And then, like I said, leverage that climate emergency declaration. Climate change action plans internally are really important, and your funding and asset management plans.
You kind of touched base on this now with answering this question in the presentation, but we know that EVs, and you mentioned that cost more than ICEF counterparts. How are municipalities justifying the greater EV costs while developing green fleet policies?
Right. So what we tend to do is develop a total cost of ownership model for each vehicle. So we would take the cost associated with the upfront costs of an ICE vehicle or whatever your traditional fuel vehicle is, add in the average maintenance costs over the life cycle, add in the average fuel costs over the life cycle, add in any other costs you would have, and that would be your total cost of ownership. And then we would run that same model for an electric vehicle. We know that we can, and it is based on some assumption of like, you know, $20, $23, assumption of gas being at a certain price, assumption as electricity or whatever other fuel is a certain price. But run it through that same life cycle for the total cost. And often you'll find that the no or low carbon option is lower cost over the life cycle.
Corporate fleet upgrades and facility upgrades are handled by two different departments. How can interdepartmental collaboration be enhanced to develop policies jointly? Kind of like a follow-up question on that is what departments should be involved while developing fleet policies?
Right. So when developing the policies, I think obviously your finance department is really important to ensure they're included. Any of your internal user groups, they should be consulted in developing a green vehicle policy. When you're looking at facility upgrades, that's kind of different. Generally, you'll have a facilities team that would look after your facilities. And what I've seen as being really helpful, and shout out to my friends from Burlington who are on the call, but what often works really well is during your annual budget cycle, ahead of time, ahead of your, say, 2024 capital budget submission, you'll have a really good idea of what assets you're going to be replacing in the following year. And that's ahead of time, 8 to 10 months ahead of time is when should be meeting with your facilities partners and saying, okay, well, here's the vehicles we have on the replacement list. Here are the ones that we think we will be able to get buy-in from the end user. And here's where they start and end their day. So the facilities folks can proactively look at those sites and determine, is there sufficient capacity there currently? Where would they park? Things like that. And another important piece is, I think if you have take-home vehicles in your fleet, that'll definitely be a challenge as well, because then there's a whole nother set of concerns that that you may have converting your fleet if people will need to charge at home. So in Mississauga, we don't have any take-home vehicles, so it makes things a little bit easier for us. But that is another challenge for people who do.
I'll have there's a question we just received in the chat that it seems like a follow-up, but has Mississauga produced a TCO for the fourth lightning?
Yeah, we have done that. We had one ordered actually last year, but like many others, our order was canceled by Ford. Just the price we got was too good, or they just ran out of units. I'm not sure how it exactly happened, but we did run the total cost of ownership analysis for those vehicles. We actually do it for each category. I might not do it every time, but for each category of equipment, I know what the meter is, how long we should have it, and we run it each time.
I'm continuing on to the next question, which is, what support resources are available for municipal staff developing EV fleet policies? What resources have you found most helpful? And while you're answering this question, I will try to put in the chat actually 2 resources that Clean Air Partnership develop that may be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so my advice was going to be connecting with the Clean Air Partnership. There's a lot of different groups that you can be engaged with through the Clean Air Partnership. Another great group that I'm involved with, and I see some of my colleagues on the call too, is the Canadian Association of Municipal Fleet Managers. That group is really collaborative and supportive. I didn't ask if I could plug them today, but hopefully it's okay. If you're looking for best practices, that's a great group to get tied into and work with.
Yes, no, that's totally fine, because we also, time to time, we work together with them. We do convene, for those on the call, Clean Air Partnership convene a sustainable fleet working group that we are meeting, I guess, twice per year. But there is a ongoing communication and resources hub. So feel free to reach out and we can include you in that group as well. Thank you, Jessica. Moving on to the next question, which is, how can fleet replacement policies be used by municipalities to advance the transition to EV fleet?
I think it's just really important that once you have these policies in place, that any reports or requests that you're making to council, that you're aligning these policies with your requests. It's more of a reminder, and some municipalities have it already built into their templates for reporting, but it's a reminder that this is already a practice or a principle that the politicians support. So you said you support the Climate Change Action Plan, you said you support the declaration. This is just a reminder that this report closely aligns with those policies or those declarations. So it's important to make sure that that's included and highlighted in any of your presentations or reports to make sure that, you're just reminding them of that alignment and synergy.
Receiving more questions here. what are some of the best practices for navigating charging infrastructure upgrades and EV fleet procurement concurrently?
So charging, like I said, charging infrastructure, I'm glad in Mississauga that that's not in my portfolio. It's a huge, it's a different understanding and knowledge base that's required for those teams. So it's really important that into any contract that you have with charging infrastructure providers, what I've seen to help us be successful, because obviously more and more we're asked to do more with less and provide this charging infrastructure. So build in maintenance and support into your contracts for the acquisition of the infrastructure itself, because very quickly the infrastructure can become out of date, or somebody breaks something on it. So build that support in. I think it just it can make your life a bit easier. And then, yeah, again, working with your facilities folks, if you have a dedicated bucket for funding or for infrastructure, then that is really helpful as well. So it helps you say, okay, the municipality knows we need to install chargers to support the fleet, but we don't know, 10 years out, we don't know exactly where it needs to go, but we know we're going to need it. So that's where that relationship between your facilities team and fleet ahead of time, the year of, that's where that comes in really, really helpful.
I have a follow-up question on this, and I don't know if you're aware, are there any guidelines on estimating the number of chargers one should install to accommodate the growth in EV adoption?
I don't know that there's, I think the question is if there is a formula. I think it's just looking at your fleet and, where there is availability in the market today. I think based on the federal government's, plans to, and Desi, you would know this better than me, but I think every new vehicle has to be green by 2035, is it?
Yeah.
So, by 2035, you'll probably, from today until 2035, that's 12 years, you'll probably replace everything in your fleet in 12 years, or the majority of things. So, it's just, I think, a calculation as to what we do is we look at what we have to replace now, do some quick math. We always buy the dual head chargers, and then identify the locations that we'll place them at. But it's not a formula I can give you, unfortunately.
And I actually am I'm trying to think in my head if there are some other documents that can guide you in this, but I think it's what Jessica, it's really dependent. I don't think there could be any guidance because it's really depending on the use of the fleet and how many vehicles the municipality has and projection, the projection. Okay, there are more questions jumping in. So what are some types of long-term policies that can support the transition to all new fleets purchase to EVs to meet the federal government's 2035 mandate?
Sorry, what are some local policies?
Long-term policies.
Oh, long-term. I think the climate change action plans are kind of a longer term policy that a lot of municipalities, well, everybody's mandated to have. So tying into those plans would be the most prevalent that I can think of. And again, your asset management plan, that's another longer term plan that speaks to your overall asset condition. But yeah, it's more the climate change action plan, your corporate climate change action plan.
You've You have experience from some more smaller municipalities. There's a question here in regards to rural municipalities and what will be the difference of fleet policies between rural and urban municipalities?
So I don't think that the policy is really different at all. The policies between large and small municipalities, you still want to achieve the same things and your objectives are still the same to reduce emissions. So from a policy perspective, there isn't too much difference. I think how you go about it might be different, and your transition based on the number of assets, fleet assets you have might be a bit slower, or your replacement cycles, but that's okay. Depending on where you're located geographically, there may be some additional concerns as well. I just say, like, start slow, ensure your climate throughout all types of Canadian weather supports electrification. We know that battery degradation is a real thing in the cold climates. So it shouldn't be a barrier, like in Southern Ontario, it's not a barrier, but for maybe some of the Northern Ontario or Northern Canada type of climates, it's a consideration. So again, start slow, pilot, bring that vehicle on site and do some demonstrations and try it out for yourself if you can. Or work with another municipality who already has one. We were really lucky last year. The region of Peel, their police force had some units that we were interested in. They allowed us to work together and demo and test some of this stuff. So hopefully you have some partners locally that can help you as well if that opportunity is available.
This is great segue to the next question, which is, can you provide some information about procurement policies for group EV purchases? I know you just mentioned that if another adjacent municipality, then you can test EVs, but is there something that provides the availability for group EV purchases?
So if you're a smaller fleet, you can definitely work with local municipalities around you, or we have also worked with other municipalities on procurements that are either particularly challenging or what we're seeing a lot in the market, and I know others are feeling this too, but even if you want to buy a vehicle, how do you get it? You know, whether the manufacturer only has a few available. So it's leveraging your contract. So the more units you're requesting, the better. So if you can partner with other municipalities and leverage your collective buying power, that can be helpful as well. Yeah, and consider multi-year agreements. I mean, in this climate right now, we're seeing significant increases from, like, say, a 2022 model to a 2023 model. So that can be a bit difficult today, but yeah, just leverage any buying power that you can with others. There is I think they were called Sourcewell before. I don't have a whole lot of experience with them myself, but there is, you know, there is fleet pricing that can that is widely accepted, that you can get some discounts through.
We did have I believe we have more information on that. I'll try to dig it in now while you're answering the question, because I think it is Sourcewell that we talked with them about this. I'll try to find the information. Meanwhile, the next question is, do you have a policy or practice that sets a value for resale for end-of-life EV vehicles? The person from the audience saying that our business case currently has it set to $0 for an end-of-life EV, given the early days of the EV resale market.
Sorry, what was the last part of that question? I heard that the question was around what is the end of life value?
Yeah.
What was the end of the question?
So they're just saying that in their business case currently has $0 for end of life, given the early days of the EV resale market.
Yeah, so we do, and I'm happy to share this with anyone who is interested after the call. But our analysis at end of life takes into account obviously age, meter, maintenance, and repair over life, and then overall condition. And once we hit a factor of 15, we automatically look to replace that unit. Given the level of funding we have in Mississauga, we have to cut a significant portion of, those assets that should be replaced because we don't have adequate funding, and then add on the additional costs of electrification. But I would say, for electrification, if you're trying to replace early, you can get some estimates on resale value from like local assessors. If you're looking to get rid of something ahead of time, like say if you want to replace a vehicle early, you can get a local assessor to provide you a value and then go from there. We're seeing great, I'm not sure about others, but we're seeing great resale values of our old vehicles, even though, they're in awful condition by the time we get rid of them. But we're seeing really great returns, and you can include that into your total cost of ownership calculation as well. We always make sure that that's part of the story, an estimate.
I believe we have maybe one more minute to be separated in groups, and then we'll convene you back, but maybe that's enough time to answer. Okay, 2 minutes, I just see. Enough time to answer maybe one more question, which is, what is your thought on like hydrogen? How do you deal with the view of waiting for future options such as hydrogen, also the perceived capacity issues with the power grid?
Right. So in Mississauga, we haven't, as a corporate fleet, we haven't looked at the hydrogen option a whole lot. To be honest, because it is quite early and we don't have availability, we find it a bit distracting in our efforts to electrify. I know that they're like, a decade or so ago, hydrogen was very popular and fleets were going that way. And it's from a transit perspective, there's some viability there, but from our corporate fleet, we haven't yet looked too deeply into those options just because of availability as well as infrastructure requirements. The infrastructure for hydrogen is quite significant. So we're not there. But we're always looking at opportunities, and our eyes and ears are open. We know that there's some different discussions happening out west in Canada, and they tend to be a leader testing things first, but we haven't looked at that in Mississauga.
I can just jump on this and confirm that from our CEC, which is 39 municipalities in Ontario, it's the same situation like with Mississauga. Everyone is on hold and probably waiting for someone to do more like research and pilot projects probably on the west, so that we know more about that. I see that we are at the end of this breakout room. Thank you so much, Jessica, for answering all these questions. I think we were able to answer all of them. And thanks for everyone that was part of this group and raised your questions. Thank you for that. And we're going now into the main room.
Okay, I think we have most of our participants back in the main room. I hope that we had successful discussions in both the funding breakout room and here in the main room. Lots of great questions asked. So thanks so much, everybody. I appreciate you joining us today. I wanted to do a quick promotion for the next event that GMF will be hosting. This is part of our GMF webinar series, and the next webinar will be on being the face of your community's climate action plan. So please join us at 1 p.m. on April 27th. And lastly, we just wanted to say thank you for joining us. And I'm about to launch a poll. If you could just take a quick moment to give us your feedback about how you felt the session went before you leave, that would be much appreciated. We hope to see you soon at a GMF event, and I hope you have a great day.